going to outline in brief the other cases that will not be automatically added. For example, sexual exploitation of a person with a disability, not automatically added. Sexual assault with a weapon. You sexually assault someone with a weapon, you won't be automatically added to the sex offender registry. It's very concerning. I think people should be concerned about that, especially given the court's record before where only half were added. Aggravated sexual assault with the use of a firearm. And there's a very long list of concerning circumstances where you won't necessarily be added if you violate someone like this. And I think that for me personally, I know for our party, it's deeply concerning that that could be the case given the track record before 2011. The 5-4 decision, I did want to go into that a little bit because I thought that the dissenting arguments were quite compelling. And again, this was mandatory registration. I'll just read a little bit of the minority or the dissenting opinion. I do think it's relevant to this discussion. The minority dissent argued that Parliament was pursuing a rational objective in mandating all sex offenders be included in the registry because this group of people as a whole, they argued, possesses an increased risk to reoffend, and the previous system of judicial discretion had resulted in up to 50% of sex offenders staying off the registry. The dissent went on to further argue, but in substance, they cherry-picked just one, they referring to those who struck this down on the court. They cherry-picked just one such example, an exceptional case involving an offender who was wheelchair-bound, that my colleagues can point to only a single extreme case where it was clear at the time of the sentencing that the offender did not pose an increased risk tends to prove my point, not theirs. And in conclusion, the dissent argued, in finding it unconstitutional, my colleagues fixate on the removal of judicial discretion to exempt offenders who do not pose an increased risk to reoffend. But the exercise of discretion was the very problem that prompted Parliament to amend the Criminal Code to provide for automatic registration of the sex offenders under the Sex Offender Information Registration Act. And in conclusion, they argued specifically many judges had exercised their discretion to exempt offenders in a manifestly improper manner. Again, this is the Supreme Court arguing this, at least in the dissent. And the registry's low inclusion rate undermined its efficacy. The evidence is clear that even low-risk offenders relative to the general criminal population pose a heightened risk to commit another sexual offense. It is also clear that it cannot be reliably predicted at the time of sentencing which offenders will reoffend in the face of that uncertain risk. Parliament was entitled to cast a wide net. I thought that was very compelling. I am concerned. I do appreciate the legislation seems to be doing what it can. I'm not convinced it goes far enough. I think it can go farther. We are looking to see if we can improve that throughout the stages of legislation in Parliament and in committee. And just to conclude, again, there was a reason this was mandatory. I recognize the Supreme Court decision, but as outlined in the dissent, we are talking about sex offenders and some of the most vulnerable people that they impact. We want to see legislation that can go as far as it can in light of the Supreme Court decision, and we're not quite convinced yet that we're there, and we will be looking at that very closely throughout the stages. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.